They built a conviction on fear, politics, and assumptions, not proof. 30 years later, Eddie has been a model inmate. Not a single act of violence, not a single disciplinary issue. A man who grew up behind bars but never lost his humanity. And now the truth is finally getting louder. In my latest episode, Joseph Jojo Burho, a man who's lived enough real life to know what's genuine and what's garbage, breaks down why Eddie is innocent and why this case has never sat right with the people who actually pay attention. This isn't about
where the whispers play. The door of the frame holds the secrets of the day. Locked on to Eddie, they whispered his name. Caught in a tempest, a life gone insane. Down in the dark, where the cellar path runs, a set of keys hit the dirt under disappearing suns. A house key, a car key, lost in the rush. But the state swept it up like a hand in the crush. Eddie's freedom cry, can you hear it loud? Breaking through the darkness, piercing the shroud. 30 years in chains, but the truth won't die. Unseal the past, let Eddie rise high. Unseal the notes, expose all the blocks. Rayleigh trapped Eddie in a manufactured box. 30 years of hidden facts buried in the track. It is time to give Eddie O'Brien his freedom back. Unseal the box, break down the lock. Let the truth ring louder than the courthouse clock. 3 decades of silence, a cold prison shell. Refuse to lie, they cast a wicked spell. No remorse in their eyes, they judge from the booth. But Eddie stands tall, anchored in truth. Summer is opening, the science is real. The manufactured box begins to peel. Voices collide as hope takes its stand. With every heartbeat echoes a drowning band. Eddie's freedom cry, can you hear it loud? Breaking through the darkness, piercing the shroud. 30 years in chains, but the truth won't die. Unseal the past, let Eddie rise The drums roll thunder through the halls of despair. With strings and brass, they unite in the air. A symphony of chaos reflects in the night. The fight for Eddie grows bigger, takes flight. Beneath boundless skies, the walls start to shake. Each note of resistance, a wave in the wake. A revolution of honesty will cut through the lies. As the world turns its gaze, a new dawn will rise. So gather the voices No faith in what could be said. Every expert that came said the same refrain. Eddie wasn't violent, he was fighting through the pain. Nah, the danger to the world, just a kid with a dream. They taught the wounds and scars like it's part of the theme, but they missed the truth behind the boy standing tall, caught in a system that refused to hear his call. Every single expert, they knew the facts. Non-violent heart, it's not an act. He was meant for healing, not this dark fate, but the court turned blind and sealed up the gate. Oh, oh, and sealed up the gate. With every test and interview, they painted his soul, but that didn't matter. They had lost control. They looked at a number, not the man within, ignoring all the voices that should have helped him win. The purpose of the hearing was to guide him through, yet they tossed the science like they never knew. Too dangerous, too damaged, oh, that's not who he was. Just a child in a system without a pause. Every single expert, they knew the facts. Non-violent heart, it's not an act. He was meant for healing, not this dark fate, but the court turned blind and sealed up the gate. Oh, they focused on the wounds as if pain could define the essence of a kid who's meant to shine. A constitutional failure right before our eyes, lost in the shuffle where justice dies. America, can you see? Can you open the door to the voices unheard, fighting for more? Every single expert, they knew the facts. Non-violent heart, it's not an act. He was meant for healing, not this dark fate, but the court turned blind and sealed up the gate. Eddie's story is a lesson, not just for today. A reminder to listen, to show a better way. When the voices of the many are ignored with disdain, we've lost the battle and it's all in vain. Let the echoes of the experts ring loud and clear. For every Eddie standing there, we cannot disappear.
There we are, much better. How we doing, everybody? Let me grab her coffee before she gets in here. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate y'all. Give me 1 second. There we go. What's happening, everybody? How we doing today? What's going on? You know, I'm hopefully y'all happy to see me. I'm happy to see y'all. Another, free Eddie day. Hit the like, even the lurkers. We don't mind. Absolutely, man. I appreciate everybody blessing the page, and we spent the last couple of days going over some of the political stuff, that went around behind the Eddie O'Brien case. Went over the DNA, went over blood. We covered a lot of grounds. Reading the Mago Nash book. We're gonna continue to read some of the book today. The some of the arguments, basically what the Commonwealth wants to convince everybody is going on, man. But June is going to be a great month. The Rule 30 motion, is going to be filed very soon. Margaret Nash has her book being written. Where is this? Today, I wanted to go over some of the docket. I also got some videos that we're going to check out, some videos that y'all seen before, but basically so play some videos. We're going to check the docket from the juvenile transfer hearing, how it really got real, but we're here breaking down the Eddie O'Brien docket. Welcome everybody. Today we're going to dive into the official docket, the paper trail, the receipts, the timeline. The Commonwealth never expected, I think, regular people to end up reading, especially in 2026. Like, these dockets were made in 1997, basically. Let me get the dockets up on the screen for you. We're going over the actual dockets from the actual case. We're also going to show some video today. We're going to show a little clip from the Amatol test. I usually don't play videos, unless I'm sure I can use them, so we're going to check some of that out. We're going to check, play a couple clips, go over this docket and see how they got, from where they are. But what is a docket, man? A docket is basically, I don't know, like, would it be a diary of a criminal case? I mean, the motions, the hearings, every time you go to court, every decision that's made, it's basically gets put into a docket. Let's see. Yep, it's all put into basically a docket, basically. I'm sorry, I was reading something. Everything, the motions, everything. Think of it as like a little black box of the justice system. I know I'm slacking right now. I'm sorry. I'm kind of distracted. And the docket don't lie. I mean, it can't lie. I mean, it doesn't spin. It just records. It's just basically, yeah, it's basically just what goes on in court, what happened, but you start to see a pattern, not of justice, but of momentum, of pressure, a pattern of the system, running faster than the truth can really keep up with it. But let's we're gonna check out some. Let me see if I can get these videos up here. Okay. The first video. Okay, we're gonna check out some video of Marco Abreu. Before we get into this, so let's check out.
Nice. And he said, I wasn't in the bushes.
Now, this is Marco basically going over about when he was in the bushes, about when he's allegedly seen Eddie in the bushes. I think he's he's Fugazi. Yes, I think he's Fugazi. I think he lied over and over and over. I mean, you just can't believe this kid. I think that the police basically said it was him, right? It was him you seen, right? And he went with it. And he went with it. All right, let's play this.
And I said, I seen you in the bushes. And he said, I wasn't in the bushes, so I just left it at that.
Marco Abreu, Eddie O's old friend, today the witness, recounting how he saw the hawkish teen walking away from the area of the crime scene.
Could you see his face at that point?
I mean, you would think if he's seen him, he would like even at the store, it's like when they were all down the store. I mean, picture this, the courtroom, right? I mean, ears probably thick enough to cut with a knife. So now the camera goes over to the witness stand, and there sits Lion Marco, allegedly, right? A young man in a blue shirt that's big enough to, this was probably his dad's shirt, because it definitely wasn't Marco's shirt. Look how big that friggin' shirt is. But anyway, voice steady, but eyes very uneven. You could tell he's lying. He's giving all the motions to look. He's looking down. He can't look straight ahead. Can't look you in the eye. Marco's father. I mean, not Marco's father. Eddie, sits at the defense table listening, not just to words that Marco's going to say, but to the weight of the words. You have to look at the weight, like look at how he's saying it. Do you think this guy is credible? I mean, Big Ed in the gallery watching his son's life hang on every sentence, But let's see how this theater is that Marco puts on.
Yes, he looked over his right shoulder at me and smiled.
And
Looked over his right shoulder with a smile.
could you describe what you saw?
Him smiling, his eyes were wide open.
O'Brien seemed amused when Abreu recreated his body language, showing how he had appeared when he walked not far from Janet Downing's house not long after the murder.
Now, did you make arrangements at that time to give a second interview?
Abreu conceded to the defense in the first two interviews with police. He said he couldn't be sure it was Eddie O'Brien.
Couldn't be sure it was him. Couldn't be sure. It was probably, about when his father said, don't come here no more. And then you went back to the police station and you're like, you sure it was him? Maybe it was Eddie. I think it was Eddie you saw. And he became more sure. It's funny when things start going bad, when the pressure got to Marco. Oh, yeah, it was Eddie. Are you sure?
Moments later, he told the district attorney why.
After you spoke to your mother, what happened?
I told her that I was 100% sure that was it the whole time. The only reason I didn't say anything was because I didn't want to believe that he committed the crime.
What happened next?
She called Lieutenant Femino and Trooper Duggan, and they came to my house.
See? He feels uncomfortable about that. That was hard to get out. That's why he struggled to get that out. I think that's deception. Does anyone else see deception there?
What happened next?
She called Lieutenant Femino and Trooper Duggan, and they came to my
See how hard that was? That was hard for him to get out.
house.
Abreu conceded it was after an angry conversation with Eddie O'Brien's father that he went to his mother with the whole story.
He asked me what I had told the police down at the police station. I told him I thought it was Ed, and he didn't approve of that. He didn't really think I should have did that, but I told him I couldn't lie to the police. So
Did he lose his temper?
I don't think so. Well, he lost his temper, but I don't think it was at me.
Did he tell you not to come around the house anymore?
Yes. So
Did he lose his temper?
I don't think so. Well, he lost his temper, but I don't think it was at me.
Did he tell you
He lost his temper. I don't think it was at me.
not to come around the house anymore?
Yes.
Absolutely.
I asked him. I said,
He said, "Don't come by here no more." But as you listen to what Marco's saying, I mean, do you believe Marco? He changed his story 3 times. Deception is his demeanor. Yes, liar. Manipulating Marco Abreu. Get this kid to lie. I'll give him the world. I mean, Marco does got a decent job. Wasn't I think Riley is like the president of where Marco works, from what I've been told, but or some kind of connection. I'm not really sure what the connection is, but there is a connection. Do not believe him. I mean, this kid's job on the stand, right? It was simple. I mean, like, tell what he saw, what he heard, what he remembered, but in a case like this, right, every word became a weapon. He kept pausing. That just became more suspicious to me. All the pauses. He just had a lot of signs of deception. I mean, the prosecution needed him to sound certain. The defense needed him to sound unsure. But the truth was somewhere. But where was it? Was it between the tremble in his voice and the silence that followed? That's what I heard. Eddie sits there, 15 years old. accused of, red rum, because I can't keep saying that word because they're not going to push these videos. So, Eddie's accused. He's not allowed to speak. Watching a friend, lie against him. He's not allowed to react. He's just supposed to sit still while the world decides what his face means. What does that face mean? Oh, he's making a different face. What does that face mean? Big old lion Mako Brew, carrying the weight of a community. I mean, the prosecutor's expectations, all while trying to remember what happened on a night that changed everything. But no one said Adi Ortiz in the bushes where his cab keys mysteriously were. I don't blame Ed Sr. for telling him not to come around. I would have done the same thing. Absolutely. But when you watch the clip, I mean, Marco on the stand, Eddie O'Brien at the table, the father, in the back. You're not just seeing testimony. I mean, this is a moment that shaped the verdict. A young witness under pressure knows he has to lie. A young defendant, knows he's screwed. A courtroom that had already decided what story it wanted to hear. They knew what they wanted. They wanted a horror story. They didn't want the truth. But for the truth, the truth's still fighting to be heard. The truth's still fighting to be heard. Give me a minute, y'all. I'll be right back and we'll continue.
In the courtroom lights, truth's gonna bend. Heffernan standing tall, trying to defend. Said it looked bad on paper, but it's all deeper. Politics lurking, call it a grim reaper. Eddie was just a kid, caught in the fray. But the power players had a game to play. From day one, they wanted him to fall. A kid in the spotlight, crushed by it all. Heffernan knew the truth. No, it ain't fair. Politics behind the scenes, no one would care. Guilty or innocent, the verdict was set. Justice wasn't blind. It was a political bet. Dr. Bonham was chosen, thought he would be right. A face of fairness in that long, dark night. But the DA smiled wide, played both sides slick. Heffernan thought neutral, but maybe that's the trick. With a stroke of a pen, my ruling was sound, but the world turned again. They needed him guilty to fit their plan, change the laws mid-game. Oh, what a scam! Heffernan knew the truth. No, it ain't fair. justice wasn't blind, it was a political bet. Juvenile court, he should have stayed there. 20 years, not a slap, but no one would care. System in panic cause he stood his ground, but the wheels of justice just turned him around. They wanted Eddie down, they wanted him lost, with the stakes so high, he paid the cost. Happening's truth reigned clear in the dark. Tried to bring light, but it missed the mark. Eddie, a kid caught in a game, lost in the shuffle, society's shame. So here's a lesson carved deep as stone: justice shouldn't wear a political tone. Heffernan stood firm, knew it wasn't just. In a world focused on power, who can you trust? Heffernan knew the truth. No, it ain't fair.
No, it ain't fair. You know, so this next clip, you know, the night jury went home. I mean, let's paint this picture for you, because this video, I think, captures one of the most intense moments probably in the entire, you know, the juror, 12 strangers, you know, holding a child's life in their hands, have just been sent home for the night. Not because the case is simple, not because the evidence was even clear. They just needed time to breathe, think, you know, carry the weight of what they heard. Let's see what this weasel has to say.
He got caught in that house, and he did what he had to do.
This boy's innocent. He didn't commit this crime. He didn't do it.
He doesn't care. He doesn't care.
They want you to think that this is a scary, horrible, hidden murderer, monster, stalking the streets of Prospect Hill for 15 and a half years with no one knowing it?
It is very difficult for anyone to imagine how anyone could do this to another human being, particularly when it's the boy next door and it's the mother of his best friend.
The monster that killed Janet Downing didn't come out of that neighborhood. The monster that killed Janet Downing didn't come out of the house where Edward O'Brien was raised.
3 bloody fingerprints on the inside of the front door. That's not theory. That's fact.
Yes, absolutely. No one denied that he was not in the house. That's a fact, that he was in the house. But that's all you knew. You know? I mean, this is the moment right before the verdict, right? The moment where the courtroom is quiet and Riley's trying to put on the show of his life. You know, lawyers are pacing. Eddie's sitting over there at the defense table. You know, his face is still, but his eyes tell a story. A photo of Janet's being shown to the jury. Prosecutors are leaning in. Defense attorney Robbie George, you know, pushing back. The judge watching everything. I could picture it just by this picture right here. You know, absorbing it all. The final showdown. The final showdown. But if you read between the lines, one of these videos will tell you who did it.
He may have been at the scene. He could have been at the scene. doesn't mean he killed her.
He may have been at the scene. Doesn't mean he did that. I mean, when the prosecution stood up and tells the jury, right, the evidence proves Eddie was, was the guy, you're kind of like, what? I mean, emotions? Absolutely, man. When going in about the brutality of the crime, you're selling them on fear. They leaned on the number of wounds, over 90 that Janet had. That's what the prosecution was leaning on because shock value was powerful. He said the evidence proves Eddie's the killer. A fingerprint in the house, that does not prove that. They leaned on their emotions. They got people afraid, right? The brutality of the crime. Let's sell that. How many stab wounds did she have? Yep, great fact. But it's not a fact that Eddie did it. Over 90 because that was shock value. Right? Now let's talk about a motive. They didn't explain the lack of blood on Eddie, right? Could they explain the lack of blood? Where's all the blood? One juror said, I can't believe there was no blood on him. What, he jumped in a pool? That's reasonable doubt right there. They didn't explain any of this shit. They didn't explain the missing forensic links. And what does look at the horror? What, someone did this? And we just say it was Eddie O'Brien? That's not proof.
Guilty of murder in the first degree. Murder committed with deliberate premeditation and extreme atrocity and cruelty.
No murderer, no dark side, no monster.
Bob George getting up there. They didn't prove their case. No motive, no physical evidence tying Eddie to the crime. And he reminded the jury that Eddie was a 15-year-old kid with no history of violence. He reminded the jury that the investigation was rushed in minutes. He reminded the jury that the Commonwealth filled in gaps with assumptions and not facts. I just can't believe they got a conviction on this. He told them you cannot convict a child, or maybe you can. Because that's exactly what you did. See, the defense chose not to put Eddie on the stand. Why?
He got caught in that house.
The defense feels the prosecution had already, see, I don't know. They were saying because the prosecution filed a motion to already impeach Eddie with prior inconsistent statements, right? Meaning that they were ready to twist Eddie's words. They were going to confuse him. They were going to make a 15-year-old look like a liar. So really putting Eddie on the stand in this type of trial, they compared it to putting a lamb in a lion's den. If you were to put Eddie on the stand, Riley would have chopped him down, ate him up. So the defense, in my opinion, I think probably protected Eddie, right? But the jury never got to hear Eddie's voice, and I wonder if that would have been a difference maker. I don't think so. I mean, it seems like the fix was in, but that silence, the Commonwealth used it to their advantage. So that night the juror goes home, not to relax or probably to unwind, but maybe to carry a burden, to convict this young kid, send him to jail for the rest of his life in prison. This face right here, the prosecution's telling him a story of horror. The defense, is telling them, no, it's all doubt. Don't listen to them. And Eddie sits there quiet, watching adults decide his life, watching adults decide his fate. I mean, this is right before the system just closed in and swallowed this kid alive. This is the moment where truth, fear, politics, pressure all collide head on in the courtroom. This is the moment. And the next day, what happened then? But we're talking about the moment right before the verdict, the moment where the jury walked out the door and a 15-year-old boy sat waiting to hear whether he would ever walk out again. How did Eddie feel at that moment? How did Eddie feel at that moment, man? Crazy. It's scary to even think about. Right after closing arguments, the shouting, the finger pointing, after the judge dismisses everybody for the night. And I'm sure Eddie, being alone in his bunk, holding his breath, not really knowing what to do, what's the right move, what's the bad move, what do I do? The camera cuts to Eddie, 15 years old, sitting still, shoulders tight, looking forward, not speaking, probably don't know what to say, not moving. The way that a kid would really absorb a punishment he doesn't understand, looking around the room, I mean, this room was built for grown-ups, not kids like Eddie O'Brien. And then the prosecutor Riley and his team, hands slicing the air, evidence. He's saying evidence proves O'Brien is the killer. They're confident, they're focused, they're selling a story, Oh, the brutality, the horror of what allegedly was done. But they don't have motive, right? They don't have physical evidence tying Eddie to the scene. You know, how do they tie Eddie to the scene on this one? They don't have motive, right? They don't have physical evidence, but they do have fear. And they definitely used fear as a weapon. You know what I mean? And then at that point, yeah, I could imagine Miss Trisha O'Brien said it was a nightmare that you couldn't wake up from. And it's still a nightmare, you know? You know, the camera's probably showing, you know, a photo of Janet, you know, and this is intentional. This is like an emotional leverage, you know, this is what the prosecutor tries to do when he wants the jury to feel the loss, you know, the tragedy, the brutality. That's what you're selling them on. It ain't about Eddie at this point. It's about the brutality of the crime. This is so horrible. Yes, it is. When evidence is thin, this is what prosecutors do. They want the jury to feel the loss. You know, this is how closing arguments work when the evidence is horrible. They want to lean in with emotion. You know, and then we have Robert George. He's calm, intense, pacing, you know, speaking right to the jurors, you know, like he's trying to pull them back from the edge. No, 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 easy. He argues that the prosecution didn't prove its case. There's no motive, there's no evidence. We can't prove that Eddie red roomed to anybody. He has to remind them that Eddie is a child. He has to remind them, right, that the investigation was rushed. Nothing's ever good when it's rushed. He has to remind them that the reasonable doubt isn't a suggestion box. It's not a suggestion at all. It's the law. And it has to be followed. And I know people are saying, oh, but what about the elephant in the room? What, Eddie didn't testify? Is that what you're going to say? Can I have some? Can you make me some?
Yeah. Sorry, I had to take a shower.
Yeah.
I don't feel good.
You know, but Eddie didn't testify. All right, you know what? A lot of defendants don't testify. It's your right against self-incrimination, right? But the moment the jury realizes they will never hear Eddie's voice, not because he's hiding, not because he's guilty, not because a prosecutor, no pun intended, filed motions to impeach him with inconsistent statements, meaning that they were ready to twist Eddie's words into knots. Anything Eddie said, they was going to twist it around. They really thought Eddie was going to testify because even they knew they didn't have a case. The defense protected him. But silence in a courtroom, right? They weaponize silence. This is their world, these lawyers. They know how to use it against us. You know, so when the jurors were starting to leave the courtroom, they're getting their coats on, they got their notes in their hand, their faces, making all their stupid little faces. You know, oh, they're going home. But they ain't going home to relax. I already said that. They're going home. Are they carrying the weight of a child's life? I mean, it didn't. We know the end result, so probably not. So now Eddie O'Brien sits there waiting for a verdict that's going to decide if he's ever going to be a free man again, if he's ever going to walk free again for something that he didn't do. But Eddie's still thinking, I didn't do this. They're going to come open the door anytime. I mean, you look at the footage, you know, no matter what part of the footage you go to, you know, this is a system in motion. This is a system that had already built momentum, right? It already shaped the narrative, and it already pointed the finger at Eddie O'Brien. So when the jurors went home, all the pressure stayed in that room like a pressure cooker, and the next day, the jurors were back, and they were ready to read the jury. They were ready to face Eddie O'Brien, which is horrible. Which is totally horrible that Eddie had to go through some of this stuff. And strength will pay off. Right, we are so sorry, Mrs. O'Brien, for everything you had to go through and everything you still have to go through, worrying about, is my Eddie okay? He wanted, his lawyers told him it wasn't necessary. He said they had reasonable doubt. I got faith in Jesus had taken the wheel. Now he's had enough too. Absolutely. You know, we're going to get back to more. We got a couple more clips, you know, that we're going to show you. You know, a few more clips that we're going to yeah, so we'll be right back.
Just a boy from Somerville, caught in the storm, innocence shattered in a world so torn. They said it was fear, reopening the doors, filled with whispers behind closed floors. A white boy convicted made it look fair, but in the shadow of justice, the truth laid bare. Eddie was a name, but just a pawn in the game, sacrificed and railroaded. Nothing felt the same. Oh, just a boy from Somerville. They played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure The DA showboating, just trying to amass. The system wanted justice, but justice was blind, changing the laws, leaving truth far behind. Remove the judge who dared to be just. Eddie was demonized in the world's cruel thrust. Size mattered not when politics run deep. From day one he fought, but all they did was sweep. Just a boy from Somerville, they played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. And those inside knew the story was wrong. We could have done better, sang the old wrong song. Experts pressure to twist the truth, arm in the court of despair. There was no charm, he never stood a chance from the very start. A tragic confession, a broken heart. Watch Eddie's face when the world turned cold. An innocent spirit caught in a tale retold. The system failed him, that much is clear. A boy from Somerville, lost in his fear. Yet in the ashes, his story remains of the justice betrayed and the bitter pains. Through the lens of history, we sing his plight. Remember the boy who stood up to the night. Just a boy from Somerville, they played with his life as if it was a thrill. Politics and pressure, shadows at play, innocent hearts lost in this twisted ballet. So let's tell his story, raise voices, unite. For every Eddie, let's stand up and fight. Just a boy from Somerville, forever will stand in the heart of the people. His truth in our hands.
You know, some of the docket breakdown that basically, the whole juvenile transfer hearing, you know, 1 second. So when we break down the docket, I'm sorry, I had to check something out. When we break down the docket, this is the official docket, from the Eddie O'Brien case, the paper trail, the receipts, timeline, a lot of this stuff that, of course, they didn't expect us to be reading it in 2026. That's for sure. But what is a docket? It's basically, just say a notebook of a criminal case, that they keep track of every motion, all the dates, every time you go to court, any decisions that are made, so it's kind of like your little black book, of the justice system. I mean, it's just records, right? But when you look at Eddie O'Brien's docket, you start to see what I've noticed. I seen a pattern, right? Not a pattern of justice, but pressure, right? I seen a system that was really trying to hide the truth, but couldn't keep up with itself. You know, when you look at when everything first started, right? And this is the part of the docket where you see how fast the machine starts moving, the arrest, the arraignment, the charges, like dominoes falling all over the place, right? But before anybody ever asked the right questions, I mean, the system wasn't slowing down. It didn't want nobody to look around, just keep it moving. You know, the motions, the hearings, the red flags. I mean, this is where the defense tries to raise issues. They tried evidence, problems, you know, investigative gaps, you know, things that they didn't agree what was going on procedurally, if I said that right, you know. And the docket shows you how the court responds as well. I mean, sometimes whether it's denied, whether it's allowed, I mean, the judge's notes. But in a docket, you could also see a pattern of denials in a case, you know, with this many unanswered questions. You know, it tells you basically this shit ain't stopping for anybody. This train is going to keep it moving. You know, the battles, witnesses called, evidence, objections overruled. Every time something is done, you know, it's basically a reminder that the Commonwealth, how fast they locked onto Eddie, and everything else just became background noise. I mean, the motions, you look through this docket, right? Look at this. We'll go through it real quick. Like, you know, just years of filing papers, new trials, appeals, evidence, forensic challenges. And it keeps going. And it shows how hard the system fought back as well against the O'Brien family. Because once a conviction is in place, right, the Commonwealth guards it like a fortress, like we see Eddie where he is now. You know, and why does the docket matter? Why am I even telling you all this, right? It's not written to make anyone look guilty or innocent. It's the truth in order, basically, you know? And when you read it with clear eyes, you know, you start to see the story behind the story. You start to see the pressure, the decisions, you know, the slaps in the face, hypothetically, of course. You know, the moments where justice could have taken a different turn, but didn't. You know, so this docket is more than paperwork, right? It's a blueprint of how a case can go wrong, you know, without anyone ever stopping to say, hold up, wait a minute, are we sure? Are we sure we got this shit right? And if there's super chats or gifted memberships, I'll read them in a few minutes, if there are any. But yeah, so to read it, to understand it, to break it down for the people, you know, and to keep the truth alive. I mean, we go back to August of 1995, years. Let's go back. Here's the first page of the docket. Here we are. Here's the first page of the docket. It says it's an indictment disposed by jury verdict 8/24/95, status date, courtroom 4, room 630. So this basically just says, who the attorneys are, who the attorneys for the Commonwealth, the assistant attorney for the Commonwealth, and so on. We get on to page 2, we have the defendant all alone in this big old box. And then we have the attorney, Robert Shaw, law officers of Robert Shaw Jr. Out of Cambridge, you have John Kuhner, Kuhner and Holgram, out of Boston. So July 23rd, conversion, miscellaneous action code, guilty verdict. Okay, this is August 24th of 95, 12/19, okay. Before written in real time, right before anyone had a chance to even to blink or say boo. August 24th, 1995. The day everything moved at light speed. Wait a minute, but it did have some days. All right, we'll fast forward to August. So this is when the indictment was returned on it says August 24th. We have the 19th here. Oh, this says it's 97. So on August 24th of 1995, right, the grand jury, a group of adults that never met Eddie, they heard a one-side presentation, from the prosecution that said, okay, charge him. And on the same day the indictment was returned, what the court ends up doing, they send copies to the Chief Justice. They'll send copies to the AG's office. They'll send copies to the sheriff, and then they'll order the indictment to be filed in juvenile court under Chapter 119, Section 61. And I know that because I've written it down. That's not normal speed, right? We already know where this was heading, right? It's like watching a train leave the station before anybody even has a chance to sit down. So it was Judge Donovan. She signs an order saying that this indictment for first-degree red rum must field immediately in the juvenile section. They weren't treating this like a juvenile case. They were prepping to move him to adult court before the ink was even dry. And that's where this page begins. Before the shit was even dry, they wanted to move him. So if we go to September, right here, September of 1995, right? Right here. Let me see if it shows it on there. Okay, right there. This is the writ and the warrant. Yes, there was a warrant issued for Eddie O'Brien, which is crazy because I mentioned that to his dad, and he said, "How come my lawyer didn't know that?" There was a warrant issued, but on right here, 12/19, request for writ of habeas corpus issued to Plymouth House of Correction for 12/21/95. So they was like, bring Eddie from wherever he's being held to court on December 21st. On December 21st, a bench warrant was issued, right? A bench warrant means he's not here, go get him. Right? And it said somewhere that the warrant was issued. There was a bench warrant issued. Right here. December 21st. Bench warrant issued and given to probation department. Imagine that the dude's in jail and you got to issue a warrant. Big Ed was like, I didn't even know there was a warrant issued. How's everyone doing in the chat? Everyone behaving over here? The mods handling it? All right. My entire little street can hear these songs every day. Absolutely. A fortune for all these filings, a fortune for the Commonwealth, tax money for corruption. Right, so they issued the bench warrant in December of 95, right? Which means, like, this is, I guess they said it's standard, but then again, this shit was going really, really fast. All the original papers that were sent to juvie court, Somerville District Court, they're moving the case like a damn hot potato, and not because of Eddie, but because of the pressure that that politics is putting down. So the big turning point from there, we're going to go all the way right here, May 9th, 1997. Now it says, the order is therefore ordered that delinquency complaint against Edward O'Brien is hereby dismissed. An adult criminal complaint is ordered issue forthwith, and Edward S. O'Brien is ordered to bound over to the Superior Court in the custody of the Department of Youth Services on the same terms and conditions he was held in this case by the court, Timothy Gailey Justice. This is when they waived Eddie to adult prison. So on May 9th of 97, the delinquency complaint is dismissed, right? An adult criminal complaint is then issued at this point. So Eddie is bound over to Superior Court now. This is where it just got real. So the juvenile court basically said, we're done. Because they took, a lovely Charlestown judge off the case, and they put the Gailey guy, guilty Gailey, Timothy Gailey. They end up putting him in, and if we translate that to real world terms, Eddie's screwed at this point. Now Eddie's no longer being treated as a kid. They sent him to adult court. So this is the moment that Eddie O'Brien's life changed forever. Because now Eddie O'Brien is going to go from a 15-year-old accused of a crime to an adult charged with first degree. Red rum. Even though he's still a kid, even though the science on juvenile brains was already clear, right? The evidence is shaky, right? The investigation was incomplete. But this was the political moment, right? This was the moment the Commonwealth said, we're making an example of this kid. So we go to May 20th, 1997. The first fight. A motion for stay is basically the defense saying, hold up, man, slow down. We need time. This is moving way too fast. But by this point, the train was already halfway down the damn track. Oh, he's going down to Federal Hill for pastries. Tell him to get some couple wimpy skimpies at Caserta's. You can't go to Federal Hill without stopping at Caserta's Pizza. The pastries are all good, but you got to go to Caserta's to get a couple wimpy skimpies. A couple pigs in a blanket. And I don't mean the pigs in a blanket like they got on like Broad Street and Elmwood Ave. The Italian pig in a blanket. But Sherry said her husband's going to Federal Hill for pastries. I want a couple, wimpy skimpies. Those that don't know what a wimpy skimpy is, it's like a spinach pie, baked with pepperoni. There's some olives, some cheese. It's very, very good. But anyway, so at this point, right, the defense is saying, yo, slow your roll, man. Chill out. We need time. You're going like way too fast for this shit, right? But the system wasn't just moving fast. It was running, right? This is what it wanted to do. So after the May 9th hearing, and all the way up to, the 20th, Eddie O'Brien is ordered to bound over to Superior Court in the custody of the Department of Youth Services on the same terms and conditions as he was held in this case by the court. We right here. Oops. Oh, right there. But when you look at these docket entries, it looks to me that, let me see, you see a pattern here. Appearance by Attorney George on May 20th. Appearance by defense attorney Lonnie. May 20th, here comes Riley. Is there Attorney Riley and Attorney O'Reilly? O'Reilly Auto Parts. Commonwealth Savita Singh. I mean, but when I look at these dockets, you know, you see, look, they weren't slowing down. There was no hesitation. You know what I mean? There was no real juvenile process. There was the several steps. There was no time to investigate other suspects, right? I mean, no time to examine the evidence properly. I mean, it was full speed ahead from day one. The docket doesn't show justice. What this says to me, this docket, you know, and you're probably like, it just all looks the same to me, Mike. You know, but this docket to me shows pressure. Everything I read so far on this docket shows there was a lot of pressure. It showed a system that made up its mind. You could already tell by the moves that were being done. You know, it basically showed, you know, that they already had their mind made up. You know, and that's why we're here, right? To slow it down, to talk about it, you know, to look what really happened, to ask the questions that nobody asked back in 1995. I mean, what's the story that this docket tells? You know what it tells me? That they decided what they were going to do with Eddie before they even understood the facts. I mean, that was a rush to judgment. Absolutely a rush. So when we come back, right, we're going to get into June 97. The system tightens its grips around Eddie. I mean, now in June, this is where you're going to start to see the machine tightening up, double down. And I'm sure Ed O'Brien and Trisha remember this all too well, and pushing the case forward no matter what obstacles came up. We're going to break it down. Give me a minute. Don't go nowhere. We'll play a little beat, and then we got another video for you.
Eddie O'Brien, oh what a story to tell. 15 years young, caught in a prison cell, trapped in the system. Ain't that just a shame? For a crime he didn't do, they played him like a game. Pattern so clear, yet nobody sees. Intentional lies blowing in the breeze. Documented truths, but they're buried so deep. Poor kid lost his life while the system's asleep. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes. The man couldn't keep his own story straight. Taking the kid's future, ain't that real fate? Welcome back, chat got us talking hood-wise. Dark humor and metaphors disguised in the cries. Sir, hypothetically, in a murder case, ain't it funny how a fool runs this rat race? Growth don't happen in the middle of this mess. Step back, breathe, man, just let go of the stress. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes. See, you gotta let the clowns believe they succeeded. You didn't fold a break, you just got what you needed. Took it to the chin, not the heart, you see. Don't let the chaos take space in your melody. You're built different, like a lesson they missed. Teaching them boundaries, couldn't find them on a list. Drowning in a puddle, they dragged you below. But now you let them flounder, cause they reap what they sow. So here's to Eddie, just as long overdue. Fighting for the truth like we all have to do. Step back from the noise, watch him throw a fit. Free Eddie O'Brien, let's never forget this. Eddie O'Brien, oh what a story to tell. fighting for his life in this unjust hell. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes.
Right, free Eddie till it's backwards. Appreciate everybody joining us today. What's going on, everybody? Let's see who's in the chat. We're going over the docket, the transfer hearing, which waived Eddie over to an adult, and dockets tell a story. Patricia White said, my entire little street can hear these songs every day. That's right. Turn it up and get loud with it. Shout out to Sherry, going up to Federal Hill, get some pastries. You got to get some Wimpy Skimpies. Recovery must come first. He says, O'Brien's are in my daily prayer. That's what's up. Shout out to a great mod at Denise Noel 43. Mike Hubby is driving down to Federal Hill for pastries. Riley needed it done fast so he could put his paperwork in for Attorney General. This is where Riley made his agenda. I sit here in disbelief that I can't make this shit up. Hope, comma. No, pizza in New York. You like the, the thin pizza that you got to eat with a fork, the New York style pizza. But still, you got to go for the Wimpy Skimpies when you're in Federal Hill. It ain't pizza. It's like a spinach pie. You'll love it. Shout out to Law Talkers. I get it done. Absolutely. Why didn't they investigate? Good question. That's a good question. Ed O'Brien will answer it. Ed O'Brien, why didn't they investigate? We're going over the docket, which basically waived Ed to an adult. Just showing the people how screwed up the system is. I'm sure you'll have it together, but I gave Eddie some thoughts and suggestions on fundraising. Great. Ed O'Brien said, thank you. It's like the Twilight Zone. You can't make this shit up. Mr. O'Brien, nice guy, but let's get into, let's see. Let's watch this clip right here.
Not guilty.
Guilty.
Guilty to what, sir?
Guilty to the first degree.
Go ahead, sir. Read it.
Extreme atrocity and cruelty.
The foreperson struggled with the words. 2 years, 2 months later.
Yeah, he struggled with the words because he knew it was wrong. But the video opens with, picture of Eddie, and it's basically vultures waiting for a headline. I mean, it was a crime that tore two families apart, and this wasn't just a trial, and I'm sure it's a wound that opens up for a lot of people, but right now it's a wound that probably has to be opened up, has to be talked about. But the cameras definitely finding these videos was great. Shout out to Freebird for getting these videos for me. But the camera makes sure you feel it, man. Seeing everybody's faces, seeing the emotions. I mean, the judge's voice echoes as he reads the verdict. Let's listen back in.
It was over. From Eddie O'Brien, nothing. From his family,
Mr. Foreman, is the defendant guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Guilty to what, sir?
Guilty in the first degree.
Go ahead, sir. Read it.
Extreme atrocity and cruelty.
the foreperson struggled with the words. 2 years, 2 months later, it was over. From Eddie O'Brien, nothing. From his family, an explosion.
You're a liar, son of a...
Their anger directed at the prosecutor, Tom Riley.
Yes,
I'll
we
tell
can.
you something. That Mr. Riley is no good lying son of a gun.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, this has been a frame-up from day one. Our son did not do this crime, and that Mr. Riley, his political career was on the line, and that's all he cared about. And I don't know how that man sleeps at night.
No, wouldn't have helped if we put him on the stand. This jury was ready to convict. Who knows when? But the fact is, if they convicted him on this evidence, on the basis of what we argued to him, the forensics were probably most likely what did us in.
So it sounds like he said, no matter what, if they convicted us on this evidence, no matter what we had, we were doomed. That's what I think he said. You know, but
It's not over. We get the appeal, and I'm telling you right now, I will die before my son spends any more time in jail than he has to after this.
Brian, can we talk to you about the Yes,
I'll
we
tell
can.
you something. That Mr. Riley is no good lying son of a gun.
he said he's a no good lying son of a gun. And I bet he chose his words easily there. I bet he wanted to say a lot more. They all knew they were wrong. Everybody knew they were wrong. You know, you could hear the tremble. Bud was behind the scene. Yeah, Bud was actually involved in it 100%. As Eddie sits at his defense table, you know, a grown man, you know, basically in a grown man's nightmare. You know, but his life changed in a single sentence.
After this.
Brian, can we talk to you about the Yes,
I'll
we
tell
can.
you something. That Mr. Riley is no good lying son of a gun.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, this has been a frame-up from day one. Our son did not do this crime, and that Mr. Riley, his political career was on the line, and that's all he cared about. And I don't know how that man sleeps at night. I'll tell you.
Her son was in the house when she went to
Her son was in the house.
I don't know how that man sleeps at night. I'll tell you.
Her son was in the house when she went down the stairs. You heard the testimony of the neighbor that heard her go down the stairs at 8:15. Adi Ortez's cab had to be towed from Hamlet Street where the blood drops were going down the hill. The judge would not allow that to get out in court. For 10 Adi Ortez.
And if anybody can't see that, they're blind.
Okay.
She threw him out of the house 3 months before this because he was selling drugs in the house, but they won't allow that testimony in there. Give me a break.
What coming from his cat?
Ortez.
And if anybody can't see that, they're blind.
Okay.
She threw him out of the house 3 months before this because he was selling drugs in the house, but they won't allow that testimony in there. Give me a break.
Tell the woman who spent the last 10 hours with her 10 hours of her life was spent on the porch with Gina
Our son,
Mahoney.
15 years old. I mean, give me a break. He did this in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. He killed her. He dressed her, redressed her, cut her throat. Give me a break.
Mr. O'Brien, why didn't he go on the stand and say this?
He's 17 years old. You want this Riley lying son of a bitch to prosecute him on the stand? There's no way.
They wouldn't let me.
This is a joke. This is a joke. Mr. Riley should be ashamed of himself.
9 hours telling me.
These cops lied on the stand and was proven they lied on the stand. Okay, you had Stanford, you had Stanford, and you had that Firmino in there lying to death. But Mr. Pino gets on the stand and says they were lying. But what does that mean? Two police officers get up there and lie on the stand. They gave a black eye to every good policeman in this state, and they should be ashamed.
How about that? They get up on there and lie.
Away for life. But it's not over. We got the appeal, and I'm telling you right now, I will die before my son spends any more time in jail than he has to after this.
And we saw he did to John Fitzpatrick on the stand. But we saw what he did to him, and he was one of his witnesses.
30 years experience with him.
Okay, okay. What he did to John Fitzpatrick and how he changed his testimony, you think our son was going to go on the stand and let the evil little man of Mr. Riley get on that stand and rip my son apart?
Patricia,
no.
Beyond the question of whether Eddie should testify, I just want, it's been more than 2 years.
Adi Ortez murdered Janet Downing.
That's it,
he
folks.
was involved
That's
in
it, folks. Excuse me, please.
Oh. Wow. You know, what else can you say? I mean, so after that verdict, they all go outside, but why? Of course they would be upset. The sentence life in prison, no parole, no second chance, 15 years old. Even though he's 17 at this point, no acknowledgement that he was even 15 years old. I mean, the courtroom, like, silent. I mean, everybody in there, like, had to feel it. I mean, Eddie's family, they go outside, they're surrounded by microphones, emotional, raw, furious, like, pissed. Oh, thank you, Freebird. Shout out to Freebird. Hi, just getting here. Sorry, life keeps getting in my way. Love you all, Mikey. You are doing an amazing job. Be proud, my friend. Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate that. At Law Talk is gut wrenching. Absolutely. Ed O'Brien. Look at my poor daughter behind her mom. Breaks my heart. I know it. And the man next to you here. He was in the picture at your house last week, right? This, him right here. The short guy. Mr. O'Brien, hot wrenching. Absolutely. It's such a shame. I mean, you hear the pain in their voices. This isn't justice. And it's a shame because you have like the O'Brien family, and it's like, how can they even respect the justice system now? How can they respect, everything that, Ed's dad built a career on, putting on that uniform, going to work, I mean, the prosecution twisted everything. I mean, grief mixed with anger, and a system they believed failed their son. I mean, did you see when the camera zoomed in on Big Ed's eyes? Did you see the red, the anger, the emotions, the love, all in one. When it zoomed in on Big Ed's eyes and his voice shaking, I mean, he was a man that was standing tall on the outside, but he was shattered on the inside. You know, as big as he still has to be the man of the family. He don't have a chance to be weak at this point. But when that camera zoomed in on his eyes, you could see so much in them eyes, man. I mean, this guy, you know, his whole world has collapsed. His only son. And I'm sure for the Downing family, the pain was different, you know, quieter, heavier. But they talk about the burden they carry, the years of grief, the trauma, the hole left in their family. I mean, they're surviving. But justice doesn't bring Janet back. It just ends one chapter of the nightmare and begins another chapter of a nightmare. But no, the guilty verdict has done little to heal the wounds. You know, it just opened up more. I mean, this video, I think the video that we have just seen that's on the screen, you know, this ain't news footage really. This is a snapshot, right, of an emotional moment in time. A moment, I think, when the system finishes its job, you know, and the human damage, you know, the damage is just beginning in Trisha, in Ed, and it's been going on for 30 years. You know, his daughter behind him, you know, a neighborhood divided, both of these families shattered, traumatized people on both sides of the aisle. At this point, Eddie will never walk out of prison. Janet's family still with unbearable grief. But the truth, the verdict didn't help any. The verdict didn't heal anything. The verdict just froze the pain in place. Because I think at that moment the story stopped being a trial, right? And it became a tragedy with no clear ending. I think in that courtroom, right before the verdict, when everybody's quiet, at that time, that story became a tragedy for everybody in the room that will never end. You know, that's exactly what it did, you know, a tragedy that'll never end. And we're going to get back to this docket, you know, continue this. right, give me a minute. We'll play a quick. We'll play some couple tunes. Life, get the docket back up here. Free Eddie O'Brien. Let's go, man. Everyone cheer up. I'm all real sad right there, man. My bad. Cheer up. Let's go. Free Eddie, man. Free Eddie, everybody, man. Smile. Wipe them tears outside. Let's go.
Years old, life in a flash. Eddie O'Brien's dreams turned to ash. Caught in a storm of political lies. Justice was blind, just heard the cries. In 95, when the law turned cold, a tale of the super predator, truth untold. The DA's game, playing with fate, manipulated minds, sealing Eddie's slate. Never fall. Exculpatory truths left on the shelf. Margot Nash spoke, revealing no stealth. Turning pages, the story unfolds. The politics of murder, a truth bold, and in every corner, the whispers of doubt. A system that's rigged, can't we just shout? Behind those bars, he's waited too long. An innocent heart, where does he belong? Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. Reevaluate, we're raising the stakes. Time to uncover the truth for justice's sake. No more suppression, let the voices ring. Together we rise, it's a hell of a thing. We'll sign the petition, take back the night. Fighting for Eddie, we'll win this fight. Oh, Eddie, hold on tight. We're dancing for the truth tonight. Break the chains, let the world see. Your voice is strong, it's time to be free. Justice for Eddie, justice for all. We'll rise together, we'll never fall. More than half a life in a crowded cage, but hope knows no bounds. It's never too late. Hear the rhythm, feel the beat. Justice is coming, can't accept defeat. No more shadows, let the truth shine bright. Eddie O'Brien, ready for the fight. So let's light the way with our hearts ablaze. Dancing for justice, we're entering a new phase. Sign for Eddie, let
whispers play. The door of the frame holds the secrets of the day. Locked on to Eddie, they whispered his name. Caught in a tempest, a life gone insane. Down in the dark, where the sailor path runs, a set of keys hit the dirt under disappearing suns. A house key, a car key, lost in the rush. But the state swept it up like a hand in the crush. Eddie's freedom cry, can you hear it loud? Breaking through the darkness, piercing the shroud. 30 years in chains, but the truth won't die. Unseal the past, let Eddie rise high. Unseal the notes, expose all the blocks. Rayleigh trapped Eddie in a manufactured box. 30 years of hidden facts buried in the track. It is time to give Eddie O'Brien his freedom back. Unseal the box, break down the lock. Let the truth ring louder than the courthouse clock. 3 decades of silence, a cold prison shell. Refuse to lie, they cast a wicked spell. No remorse in their eyes, they judge from the booth. But Eddie stands tall, anchored in truth. Summer is opening, the science is real. The manufactured box begins to peel. Voices collide as hope takes its stand. With every heartbeat echoes a drowning band. Eddie's freedom cry, can you hear it loud? Breaking through the darkness, piercing the shroud. 30 years in chains, but the truth won't die. Unseal the past, let Eddie rise The drums roll thunder through the halls of despair. With strings and brass, they unite in the air. A symphony of chaos reflects in the night. The fight for Eddie grows bigger, takes flight. Beneath boundless skies, the walls start to shake. Each note of resistance, a wave in the wake. A revolution of honesty will cut through the lies. As the world turns its gaze, a new dawn will rise. So gather the voices who waited too long for Eddie O'Brien. We'll sing out strong. His freedom's a fire, lighting up the gloom. As the massive, triumphant clock brings truth to the room.
Oh, yes, man. That was awesome. But we're going to go back to the docket. We're going to go to July 1st, 1997. The defense puts a motion to dismiss in, and they're basically saying, Judge, this case is weak. This case is broken. This case is flawed. This case is like fundamentally messed up, and no way this case should be upheld. And they probably had an idea what was going to happen, but throw it out. Throw it out. They attacked affidavits, legal memos, the whole package, it was like a box that's throwing a clean right hook. And then the very next day, July, July 1st, they had motion by the Commonwealth for discovery, motion by Commonwealth for hospital records of victim filed by the court, motion of Commonwealth for preservation of evidence filed in court. Change of venue, alternate selection of jury venue outside this venue with support an affidavit. So the defense files a motion to suppress evidence, meaning that some of the evidence is dirty and it shouldn't be allowed in front of a jury, right? So this could include statements, evidence, I think like DNA issues, forensic issues, anything they believed was mishandled or was, not constitutional. So the Commonwealth files opposition. So then we go to July 11th. Beep, bop, beep, bop, beep. Here we go. July 11th. Memorandum of decision and order of defendant's motion to dismiss. Order for the above reason. Defendant's motion to dismiss is denied. Margaret Hinkle, Justice. So Hinkle denies the motion. And basically, Hinkle saying, nah, this case is going to go forward. This is the moment the defense realizes that this mountain just got bigger. When Hinkle denies this, he said, man, this is an uphill battle. This is beginning to be an uphill battle. Am I right, Ed? Was this about the time? The defense unloads, at this point, all right, it's all guns blazing. We have to go in and just like all guns right now. So on July 14th, everyone's ready. The defense files motion after motion, like they're trying to pry open every damn locked door in the friggin' building. After hearing the Commonwealth motion for preservation of evidence, the following order is issued. Any and reports, notes, medical records, photographs, videotapes, audio tapes within the possession, custody, or control of Paul Spires, PhD, Gail Hockhandle, PhD, both of neurologically associates of Topfields and Paul Hard, MD of Hardy Healthcare Associates. Boy, that sounds like a stage name, right? Paul Hard. Hey, it's Paul Hard. And a defendant relating in any way to conducting of a sodium amytal infusion interview on October 30th, 1995, shall be preserved during the pendency of the case of Commonwealth Edward O'Brien. So the defense files all these motions, and here's what they were asking for, right? Preservation of evidence when we mentioned the sodium amytal interview, right? So the judge's order and all that stuff relating to Eddie's sodium amytal truth serum interview, they want that preserved, right? This is huge because it proves the interview did happen and the court knew the interview happened, right? So, 2, motion for discovery of pictures, of reports, motion of tests, of recordings, And that's basically Eddie's lawyer saying, listen, give us everything. Give us everything and the kitchen sink. Give us every photo you got. Give us every test you got. Give us every report card, weather report, any report. Give us every scrap of evidence you have. And then they don't stop there, people. They don't stop there. Am I breaking this down right, Ed? Let me know when I'm lying. Well, I'm not telling. Just let me know. Shout out to David. Welcome. Became a member yesterday. That's awesome. I'll get in the family, says Aunt Jerry. I can only imagine Auntie. So they also put a motion in for discovery regarding the autopsy. It's all right in front of you, Mike. Absolutely. So they want the autopsy details, all of it. They want, motion to inspect the grand jury exhibits. They want to see what the grand jury saw. And the fifth motion, they were putting motions in all day. Like, look at all the motions. They weren't even playing around. Motion for evidence favorable to the accused. See, this right here, I know this one. This is a Brady. This is a Brady motion. See, if you have anything that helps Eddie, we want it. You must give it to us now. And then they put in another motion for inspection of evidence by defense experts. See, they want their own experts, right, to examine evidence, not just rely on the state's people. Everything. That ain't it. We're not done with motions. We're on number 7 now, right? They wanted a motion for names of grand jurors and DA's activities. Like, you know what? We are going all guns blazing. Transparency about how the indictment was even obtained. We want to know it all. And then another motion, number 8, motion for discovery regarding other suspects. This is a big one, right, Freebird? This one right here is a big one. The defense is saying there were other suspects. We want their names. We want the evidence. We want the truth. Motion number 8 was a big one. The motion alone, I think, tells you that Eddie's lawyers believed the investigation was incomplete. It was totally incomplete. And then you go to July 16th. Right? Couple days later, after all these motions that the defense put in, they put like 8 motions in. They weren't even playing around. And now you got another blow, right? On July 16th. I mean, you're probably feeling a little good. All these motions you put in, favorite report of fingerprint examination, motion order to compel production of hair and blood samples. You put all these motions in. So you put all these motions in, and here comes friggin' Judge Hinkle again, denies the motion to dismiss again. Like, this lady also denies the motion to suppress the evidence. I mean, this is like the defense is throwing punches and jabs and kicks and bob and weave, and the judge is saying, block, 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 you suck. Like, what? What do I gotta do, Your Honor? The fix is in. So now let's fast forward to July 24th, 1997. Right here, I noticed records received from Somerville Hospital. Now, the judge issued orders on the discovery motions. Some things allowed, many things are restricted, but this is the court saying you can have this, but not that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. But this is where it's at. August 15th, my anniversary. Wow, August 15th. My wife's birthday is the 16th, and my mom's birthday is the 17th. Busy August. And one of my grandchild's, right, is the 17th too? Yeah. So on the 15th of August 15th, where are we? Here we go. August 15th, finding of fact, ruling of law and order of defendant's motion to suppress. Denied again, of course, Hinkle. Coffee sent to both sides. So this day is massive also because a motion to admit the sodium amytal and the polygraph results, the defense is saying, let the jury hear that Eddie passed both tests. They even file a full legal memo explaining why. Right? No, the second one was a motion to exclude DNA evidence, right? They challenged the DNA because the DNA did not match Eddie. Now, how is Eddie still locked up? Like, the DNA didn't match Eddie. Does that, really? Motion to exclude certain crime lab testimonies. That was another motion that was filed that day. They are attacking the reliability of the state's witness. And then it wasn't over. Number 4 is coming. The motion for individual voir dire. They want jurors questioned one by one to avoid bias. I gotta say, Eddie's lawyers was like, let's put all the motions out there. The Commonwealth files a motion to preclude the sodium amytal evidence. Oh no, we don't want it. They're saying, do not let the jury hear about the truth serum interview. Of course they don't, because Eddie passed it. So the defense files a notice of an alibi, right? And we're still on the 16th. We're like, right. The sodium, defense response, motion to compel. So the Commonwealth wants to preclude the tests. Do not let the jury hear about the truth test. Of course they don't want them to know about it. I mean, when the defense filed the notice of alibi, the 6th motion of the 15th, the defense was saying Eddie was somewhere else. Here's the proof. And this is one of the most important filings in the entire case. because the defense was fighting, the systems just wasn't listening. I mean, the docket shows you, it shows a defense team fighting like hell, filing every motion, raising every issue, challenging every damn weakness of the case. And what did the Commonwealth do? They block it, they deny it, they oppose it. And what did the judge do? You know what I mean? Like, not a damn thing. He denied it, denied it, denied it. So was this a fair fight? You know what I mean? This was a 15-year-old kid up against a system that already made up its mind. And the emotionless Wreck-It tells the story better than anybody does. And this is why we are here, to read, to expose the truth, to show the world what really happened, back in 1997. And when you see the pattern, you just can't unsee it. You just can't unsee it once you expose it. When you make it up till 97, I mean, this is where shit starts to turn into a full-blown street fight between these two. Like, not literally, but motion, science, different accusations, legal strategies just flying across the courtroom like a Bob Brawl's going on. So on September 3rd, the Commonwealth, they have an individual right there. The Commonwealth saying, we want jurors questioned one by one. Why? Because this case was radioactive. They didn't want a group of jurors influencing each other. I mean, it's like saying, let's interview each juror separately so we can control the vibe. So the defense, right, puts a motion in to recuse the judge, right? This is big. I mean, the defense files a motion, right, to get the judge off the case, right? The judge says, we don't think, they said to the judge that they don't think that the judge can be fair and you need to step aside. And that's not a small accusation. I mean, that's like telling the referee, that in the middle of the game, you're calling this dirty. You're not being fair. The defense tried to keep out DNA evidence. The Commonwealth fires back. No way. We want the DNA in. We want the DNA in. Even though the DNA don't match Eddie, let that sink in for a minute. September 4th, right? The Commonwealth goes for character assassination now. I mean, this is where the docket just starts getting deep, right? So the Commonwealth, they got two offers of proof, right? Saying we want to introduce evidence of other bad acts by Eddie. And it's like, other bad acts? What other bad acts can you have? Let me go back and check out the chat. Let's see. Truth here, absolutely. I was in the grand jury. It was a joke. Exactly at Freebird. My husband left for work. This morning he asked me what I had planned today. I told him we had Eddie to free. He smiled and said, "That's my wife." I hear that. That's awesome, man. They exploit every loophole to control both sides. Sick games they play with people's freedom. Yeah, with people's lives. Absolutely. Riley is an evil, sick man. I used to love that song. Mods, I do not see the gift membership option. I do not see the gift membership option. Can you? I might need to reboot my computer. Let's see. Does anyone else see the gift membership option out there? That might be a question for Denise. Knows that stuff pretty well. Yep, I believe it's right down there. The dollar sign, I believe it is. You hit that one and it brings you on the gift membership. So September 4th, they want to they said they have bad acts that they can introduce. Right? They want the jury to hear things that might make Eddie look dangerous, right? Even if they had nothing to do with the case. I mean, this is like saying we can prove he did this crime, so let's bring up other stuff to make him look guilty, right? Classic tactic, right? When the evidence is very, very weak. So September 5th, I'm glad I had the chance to go over this while I was driving last night for work. The Commonwealth files, a supplemental opposition to keep the DNA in, right? So they're fighting hard for DNA that doesn't even match Eddie, right? Why? I have no idea. It just, I don't know, because it sounds scientific. I mean, is it convincing? Even if it does point to somebody else. because it's convincing, right? Because even if it points to somebody else, Riley. So when we go to let's move up a couple days, right? Let's go to September 8th, right here. This motion, P61, was first heard on September 3rd, 1997. A second hearing was held today to consider an affidavit filed by the defendant's expert. After hearing arguments of the parties, both orally and on written submission, for largely the reasons set forth in the Commonwealth's opposition, it is ordered that the motion is denied without an evidentiary hearing. Defendant's viable arguments, if any, go to the weight of the challenged evidence and is not admissible. James McDaniel, Justice. They shut down the defense. Motion denied, no hearing. If you have the arguments, then they got to go to the weight of the evidence, not whether it comes in or not. So now the jury gets to hear the DNA, even if it is questionable. This is like saying the evidence might be shaky, but we're going to get it anyway. The defense wanted to admit the sodium amytal truth serum interview because Eddie passed it. And the judge says, no, you didn't prove the technique is reliable and you accepted it in the scientific community. It's inadmissible. The court is saying we don't trust the truth serum. I mean, they don't trust it. Is that in the door, babe? Oh, okay.
Over the place.
Oh, now I'm on screen. Okay.
Over the place.
Oh, now I'm on screen. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Now let's play this. Oh, now I'm on screen. Okay. Oh, now I'm on screen. Yeah, it's kind of weird. All right. Well, we'll have to. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Well, I'll try to download it. I'll try to download it, see if that works. I know you're not. I know you're not. But Riley gave us shit. Absolutely. You know? Let's see now.
Stab her?
No.
You didn't hurt Janet Downing?
No.
Did you kill her?
No.
Eddie O'Brien denied the murder both before and after the drugs were administered. The prosecutor
Now you
says
can
it means
hear it,
nothing.
right?
He says O'Brien told different stories to the same examiner.
He never accounts for the fact that his blood is in that house. He never explains that away in the tape, and he would not have been able to explain that away at trial.
Eddie O'Brien was convicted this fall of murdering his neighbor Janet Downing in her home in 1995. The woman was stabbed repeatedly. Both O'Brien's and Downing's blood were found at the scene. Truth serum evidence has never been used in a criminal case in Massachusetts, nor has it been allowed in any major trial in the United States.
So the video opens up with Eddie, half closed eyes, body limp, hooked up to monitors, like a kid in a hospital bed, right? Not a red room, not a monster, just a 15-year-old boy that was under the influence of some powerful drugs. And Mr. OB said, Ed said, we were really nervous, not about him taking a test. We were nervous about him taking drugs. The 15-year-old kid now is going to get whacked the hell out. So the reporter sets the tone, more videos, police questioning O'Brien while under the influence of the truth serum, and right away, I mean, this wasn't normal police procedure. They said it's never been done. It really is not a standard interrogation. But what happened? Was it two detectives questioning Eddie, or was it a doctor? I mean, their voices sound calm. And Eddie's speech was slow, slurry. I mean, he was not in control. I mean, this was a drug-induced state. Eddie could not have lied.
States. And some
That's why
criminal
he
attorneys
passed
say there's a good reason.
the test.
Using a truth serum is an attempt to use a medical test for a determination that the jury is supposed to make. Are you telling the truth?
The doctor who administered the drug calls it reliable, saying it's been used clinically for 50 years.
It is new to the forensic field, but
but the drugs had quite an effect on Eddie. I mean, you got to think he's vulnerable. He's a child under the influence. They used the truth serum for POWs in the war. to tell the enemies our next plan. Right, yeah. Let's see, let's see the guy in the chat do it. Let's see, let's see Ryan go do it. Will Ryan and Adi take this test? But the video jumps to Eddie entering the courtroom, right? Clean shirt, walking besides his lawyer. This is the Eddie that the jury saw, calm Eddie, silent, under control.
In clinical medicine today, it is a valid, reliable tool.
I walked in. Right to my left, I saw Janet on the floor.
To my left, I saw Janet on the floor.
She was laying there all covered with blood.
All covered with blood now.
The blood all over the stairs and the hallway.
The bottom line in all of this is that Ed O'Brien has been convicted of killing Janet Downing. That's never going to change.
He said, that's never going to change.
And then did you?
That's never going to change. But the tape itself, there's one thing that this tape don't show is guilt. It shows a child being chemically interrogated, which something that Eddie didn't mind doing. You're a big boy, though. Eddie didn't mind taking this test. And this is where the video cuts to, the cops walking through the Downing home, gloves on, flashlights, and this was just an attempt to probably anchor the tape to the crime scene. Let's tie this tape to the crime scene, let's kind of put it all on the same footage, but the two have nothing to do with the other. The tape doesn't place Eddie there. The tape doesn't reveal new information, right? It don't solve the crime. It just shows that Eddie was under the influence. They asked him some questions and he passed. A doctor comes on. He starts to explain the sodium amytal. He explains its effects, why it's controversial, But the key line here is the tape was never seen by the jury. And that right there is a bombshell, right? The tape was never seen by a jury. The jury never saw Eddie under the truth serum. Should they have at least known about it? They never heard the questions that were asked. They never heard the answers. They never saw the state of mind of a 15-year-old boy. You don't get no sound on what? The tape or me? I got the tape paused. I got the... All right, I'm working. State police entered the O'Brien's house when Trisha and Big Ed was at the police station. I was there and they were so rude. Why wasn't it? Why wasn't it what? Wasn't it brought up in court by his attorney? The judge didn't allow his attorney to bring it up. That's why they was never allowed to see that, but I think they should have been allowed to see this.
And then did you stab her?
No,
You didn't hurt Janet Downing?
no,
Did you kill her?
no.
Eddie O'Brien denied the murder both before and after the drugs were administered. The prosecutor says it means nothing. He says O'Brien told different stories to the same examiner.
He never accounts for the fact that his blood is in that house. He never explains that away in the tape, and he would not have been able to explain that away at trial.
Eddie O'Brien was convicted this fall of murdering his neighbor Janet Downing in her home in 1995. The woman was stabbed repeatedly. Both O'Brien's and Downing's blood were found at the scene. Truth serum evidence has never been used in a criminal case in Massachusetts, nor has it been allowed in any major trial in the United States. And some criminal attorneys say there's a good reason.
Using a truth serum is an attempt to use a medical test for a determination that the jury is supposed to make. Are you telling the truth?
The doctor who administered the drug calls it reliable, saying it's been used clinically for 50 years.
It is new to the forensic field, but in clinical medicine today, it is a valid, reliable tool.
I walked in. Right to my left, I saw Janet on the floor. She was laying there all covered with blood.
All covered with blood now.
The blood all over the stairs and the hallway.
The bottom line in all of this is that Ed O'Brien has been convicted of killing Janet Downing. That's never going to change.
Yeah, so the judge should have, because the fix was in, really. I mean, the judge denied everything. Everything the judge denied. The jury never saw Eddie under the truth serum. They never heard the questions, they never heard the answers. They never saw the state of mind of a 15-year-old boy being chemically interrogated.
And then did you...
Never saw what it looked like. Eddie's lawyers said all along that it proves the young man did not do that to Janet. I mean, this is the heart of the controversy. The defense believed the tape shows that Eddie's innocent, right? Eddie's lack of knowledge, his lack of involvement. His emotional state, his truthfulness under the drugs, right? But the judge ruled it inadmissible and the jury never even saw it. Then why did you want it done? Why did you want to interrogate a kid under drugs? It wasn't allowed to be brought up by his attorney. The judge ruled it inadmissible and the jury never saw it. The public never saw it until after the conviction. I mean, this tape could have changed everything. Not because truth serum is perfect, but because it showed Eddie as a child, right? Not a monster, right? And the tape playing, see, the video ends with the tape playing again in Eddie's voice, drifted, confused. It's heartbreaking, is what it is. It's the kind of footage, that makes you question everything you thought you knew about this case. And the fact that the jury never saw it. That's the controversy here. You know, that's the injustice. They hid the tape from the jury. You know, the video isn't just evidence. It's a window into the investigation, a window the jury never got to look through. It shows a child on drugs, a questionable interrogation, you know, a vulnerable mind, a crazy technique to question a minor, you know, a piece of evidence the defense believed proved Eddie innocent. Anytime there was anything that helped Eddie, oh no, we don't need it. Gina Mahoney's testimony, it didn't fit the narrative. Virginia Reckley, it don't fit the narrative. A piece of evidence that Riley kept out of the trial. Now, I'm not saying that this tape is not the smoking gun, but it is a missing chapter, right? It's a part of the story, I think, that the jury never heard. It's a part of the truth that never made it into the courtroom, whether it was inadmissible or not. And now, decades later, right, it's one of the clearest signs that the system didn't just fail Eddie O'Brien, it controlled the narrative. Margot Nash said it. The law couldn't protect Eddie O'Brien. There was people that was going to make, you know, Governor Weld going to be in political power on the backs of these laws. Nobody could have helped Eddie O'Brien.
Tell the real Red Rum to take that test.
You know, nobody could have helped Eddie O'Brien. Now, why do I think the judge kept the tape, though? We'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about that in just a second.
Eddie O'Brien, oh, what a story to tell. 15 years young, caught in a prison cell, trapped in the system. Ain't that just a shame? For a crime he didn't do, they played him like a game. Pattern so clear, yet nobody sees. Intentional lies blowing in the breeze. Documented truths, but they're buried so deep. Poor kid lost his life while the system's asleep. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes. The man couldn't keep his own story straight. Taking the kid's future, ain't that real fate? Welcome back, chat got us talking hood-wise. Dark humor and metaphors disguised in the cries. Sir, hypothetically, in a murder case, ain't it funny how a fool runs this rat race? Growth don't happen in the middle of this mess. Step back, breathe, man, just let go of the stress. Free Eddie, free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes. See, you gotta let the clowns believe they succeeded. You didn't fold a break, you just got what you needed. Took it to the chin, not the heart, you see. Don't let the chaos take space in your melody. You're built different, like a lesson they missed. Teaching them boundaries, couldn't find them on a list. Drowning in a puddle, they dragged you below. But now you let them flounder, cause they reap what they sow. So here's to Eddie, just as long overdue. Fighting for the truth like we all have to do. Step back from the noise, watch him throw a fit. Free Eddie O'Brien, let's never forget this. Eddie O'Brien, oh what a story to tell. Fighting for his life in this unjust hell. Free him till it's backward. Guilty on paper, but he never had the hard facts. Let a fool think he won, that's how it goes. Eddie's innocence buried beneath all the woes.
Yeah. Let me tell you about a kid, only 15 years. Eddie O'Brien, caught in the gears. Political pawns, they played their game. Power and money all in his name. But was tight with will, no simple fate. Climbed the ladder, sealed Eddie's state. Wayne Bud, a prosecutor with a purpose. In the court of politics, none could touch us. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Riley and Bud, best friends since youth. Built a law firm, they spun the truth. When Riley took the case, he was never alone. Built on foundations, powerfully grown. With the Budwell network, they made a show. Charlie Baker in the mix, he's part of the flow. All linked together, climbing the heights. On Eddie's back, they rose to new sights. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was a stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Kimberly Budd, her name now in lights. Chief Justice of the court in the highest of fights. Calls Riley godfather, mentor, uncle too. Let that sink indeed, Betty's pain paid through. Judge Heffernan ruled fair, you played your part. But the pressure came down like a storm in the dark. It wasn't about truth, wasn't about rights. It was all about power and their political heights. This ain't just a story, it's a legacy. Eddie was the stone that shaped their destiny. With every connection, every hand they shake, Eddie's case became the ground they break. Eddie got used by a system so cruel. A pawn on the chessboard, they played him as a fool. So remember his name, let it echo, let it be free. Eddie till it's backwards. Fight for the right you see. Can we keep it real timeless? Let the truth ignite. We don't bend, we don't break. We will stand for the light. In the shadows of a house where the whispers play, the door of the frame holds the secrets of the day. Locked onto Eddie, they whispered his name. Caught in a tempest, a life gone insane. Down in the dark, where the sailor path runs, a set of keys hit the dirt under disappearing suns. A house key, a car key, lost in the rush. But the state swept it up like a hand in the crush. Eddie's freedom cry, can you hear it loud? Breaking through the wander through the halls of despair. With strings and brass, they unite in the air. A symphony of chaos reflects in the night. The fight for Eddie grows bigger, takes flight. Beneath boundless skies, the walls start to shake. Each note of resistance, a wave in the wake. A revolution of honesty will cut through the lies. As the world turns its gaze, a new dawn will rise. So gather the voices who waited too long for Eddie O'Brien. We'll sing out strong. His freedom's a fire, lighting up the gloom. As the massive, triumphant chord brings truth to the room.
That is a jam, right? What a hell of a jam. An imaginary box. Shout out everyone that joined us today. You know, we still got another video I want to show y'all, but I want to appreciate, big shout out to, Sherry gifted one Can We Keep It Real page membership. Thank you. Thank you, Freebird, again, like always, How y'all just getting here? Sorry, life keeps getting in my way. Love y'all. Mikey, you're doing an amazing job. Be proud. Absolutely. Thank you for your help. Absolutely. Let's see which way. All right, here we go. 20 gifted memberships, Freebird forever. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for everybody that supports the program. I just wanted to get you them videos before I went over these. Let's see, I think I'm going the wrong way, and also $10. Thank you, Mike, for the Truth and Power songs for Eddie. These hit the heart and soul deep. Absolutely, yeah, nah, this been great. Big Ed Jojo said, "I'll call you after work." Don't work too hard, Jojo. Work smart, not harder. But let's see if we can. Let me know if y'all have sound. Maybe.
Our exclusive interview took place in the presence of O'Brien's lawyer, who would not allow him to answer detailed questions about the night of the murder.
She's my best friend's mother, and she treated me with respect. I gave her the respect back. No, I think she was on my age, but she was in her 40s. I was 17, 15, actually. I was looking for teenage girls if I was ever had a crush on someone.
When you heard that she was murdered, what were your thoughts?
It was my best friend's mother.
The 17-year-old's bedroom in Somerville is just as he left it 2 years ago. A student at Don Bosco High School, O'Brien had tried out for football and made the team, but the coach wouldn't use him, saying he wasn't tough enough.
I never went into a rage. I was never mad. I'm still kind of laid back. I take things as they are.
Did you kill Janet Downing?
Eddie said it then, and he still says it today. You know what I mean? That he didn't do anything. He didn't do that. Yes, he admitted to being in the house. But I mean, in his video, he looked like a kid who probably hasn't slept in months. He agreed to this interview, just days before the trial. And if we paused right here, it's basically a 17-year-old kid facing life in prison, talking to the media without even understanding the consequences of it all. How could he even understand the consequences of it? Oh my God, I can't say sorry enough for what our corrupt, vile system. They didn't care about Eddie or Janet or the push of Bill. That was a complete disaster and people moving up the ladder politically. Absolutely. And I'm glad people are starting to really see that, and people are starting to see, what this was really about. Because I think a lot of people didn't understand, the political side of it. You're welcome. You're welcome, Trisha O'Brien. Absolutely, man. My heart bleeds for what you and your family have been going through for 30 years, and we got it right here. Free Eddie, we got the shirt on. Poor kid. I mean, he's trying to explain himself, trying to be honest. I mean, the camera isn't there to understand him. It's there to frame him. Like, this was probably another setup hit piece, And the way that they described this crime in a most sensationalist way. I mean, he's accused of, red rumming his best friend's mother by poking her 98 times. They don't say allegedly, do they? Do they say according to prosecutors? I mean, they state it like it's a fact, right? They state it like it's a fact. I mean, that's how you contaminate a jury pool, right? That's how you do it. You state shit as facts, And this is how you turn a community against a child before the trial even begins, because you want to state this stuff as facts. And then the video ends up going, cutting into, I think, Eddie in court, all calm, quiet, listening. But of course, the reporter also took it and twisted it. O'Brien said calmly in court and described in detail. Did they really say that? Did the news media really twist that up and said that Eddie sat calmly in court and described in detail how he, slash and poke Janet? That's false. If that was even said, I don't even know if that's true, if the news reported that. But if they did, that was false. Eddie never ever confessed. He never described, doing that to anybody. He always said he never admitted to doing anything. I didn't do it. I didn't do that. That's not, no, I didn't. And he's fast with it, because he didn't do it. He don't need time to think. I mean, the reporter is doing is repeating the prosecution's theory because they're there for Riley. as if Eddie said it himself. That's not reporting. That's some propaganda bullshit. That comes the most outraged part of the whole clip. The district attorney, Riley, claims, oh, Brian is a sadist who used to watch down and undress through a window. No evidence, no witness, right? No forensic support, right? No collaboration. Let me show you something. Now let's watch this clip. Now, Paul testified, right? Paul testified, that Eddie said he looked in, I look in the window and watch your sister get undressed or watch your mother get undressed, right? Right? Ain't that what Paul testified to? But I think he was caught out there. I think he lied. I think he lied. But let's watch this clip. Let me know if y'all got sound to it. Let's watch this clip right now.
I'll do my room another day when I clean it. My room ain't clean. This is how I live. See? When I nice view. See, it's showing Boston. Showing Boston out the window. See, this is our house. This is my house across the street. I can see Jeannie when she changes at night.
Yeah, I could see Jeannie when she changes at night. That was Paul. No? Oh, yeah? All right.
She changes at night. Paul, shut up. See, this is our house. This is my house across the street. I can see Jeannie when she changes at night.
Oh, you said I could see Jeannie when she changes at night.
Paul, shut up. When she changes at night. Paul, shut up.
So just remember, it was Paul is the one that said that was Paul Downing, exactly, and he testified that it was Eddie. We know it was a lie. We know. Trisha said, nobody better be watching my daughter change at night. And your mama Obi said, that's a lie. Of course it's a lie. We just wanted to expose the lie. But the so-called media said anything they wanted because it was spoon-fed by Riley. Well, now you have your own media channel now, Big Ed. So now we can put the truth out there, and that's exactly what we're doing by, bringing all these different points. Let me get this down. Hope you like the video presentation that we had today. I think I might even have a couple more in that clip, but listen, people, gotta go, gotta work tonight. I didn't get no sleep yesterday, so I've been up since I did a show yesterday, and the shift before that, and that following morning. So I'm gotta get some rest. So I gotta get some rest. I did a shift last night. I did the podcast yesterday. But thank you, everybody, man. Really appreciate y'all. Shout out to Eddie up there in Gardner, holding it down. Be safe, just know that we got your back. Shout out to the O'Brien family, Big Ed, Trish, his whole family. Shout out to JoJo, all the mods, everybody that, gifted memberships today. Congratulations to everyone that received a membership. I hope after this free membership, you continue to come back and learn about the Eddie O'Brien case. There's so much to know. Go over to the truthabouteddieobrien.com and check out all the black and white evidence that's on there, the alibis, everything that proves Eddie's innocence. How it all really went down, and let's put it all on the table. I appreciate y'all. You know what I mean? And I think until next time, let me get on the screen. Where are we? There we are. But yeah, no, we definitely appreciate everybody on so-called media. Enjoy the rest of your day. Yep, thank you. Appreciate it. Shout out to Niece Noel, always looking out, great mods in the chat, Shout out to Trish O'Brien. Shout out to my lovely wife, always right here on the side, my little sidekick helping me out along the way. Why does this dude sound like? Yeah, I get that a lot. I ain't Mike Gianti, whoever the hell that was. If Mikey was normal. Appreciate that. Absolutely, shout out to Eddie. Shout out to Witchy Candles as well. All that with no blood on him as well. Thank you for the $10. The Truth and Power songs for Eddie. Thank you for the 20 gifted. Congratulations to the 20 people that picked one up. And thank you for another 20. But appreciate everybody. All right, we out of here.
no faith in what could be said. Every expert that came said the same refrain. Eddie wasn't violent, he was fighting through the pain. Now
You didn't hurt.
danger to the world, just a kid with a dream. They top the wounds and scars like it's part of the theme, but they miss the truth behind the voice standing tall, caught in a system that refused to hear his call. Every single expert, they knew the facts. Non-violent heart, it's not an act. He was meant for healing, not this dark fate, but the court turned blind and sealed up the gate. Oh, oh, and sealed up the gate. With every test and interview, they painted his soul, but that didn't matter. They had lost control. They looked at a number, not the man within, ignoring all the voices that should have helped him win. The purpose of the hearing was to guide him through, yet they tossed the science like they never knew. Too dangerous, too damaged, oh, that's not who he was. Just a child in a system without a pause. Every single expert, they knew the facts. Non-violent heart, it's not an act. He was meant for healing, not this dark fate, but the court turned blind and sealed up the gate. Oh, they focused on the wounds as if pain could define the essence of a kid who's meant to shine. A constitutional failure right before our eyes, lost in the shuffle where justice dies. America, can you see? Can you open the door to the voices unheard? Fighting for more. Every single expert, they knew the facts. Non-violent heart, it's not an act. He was meant for healing, not this dark fate, but the court turned blind and sealed up the gate. Eddie's story is a lesson, not just for today. A reminder to listen, to show a better way. When the voices of the many are ignored with disdain, we've lost the battle and it's all in vain. Let the echoes of the experts ring loud and clear. For every Eddie standing there, we cannot disappear. Manipulated minds, sealing truth.